It's one thing for Americans and, of course, people here on this side of the hemisphere to kind of get worried about the Trump administration and their war on narcotics by blowing up speedboats in the Caribbean. It's something totally different when our neighbors across the pond are actually starting to not want to be a part of the system. And that's what we're seeing right now. While this picture is a bit misleading, is this one of the headlines I had just to kind of bid people out there. So yeah, it's for clicks. But the UK is now not sharing intelligence with the U.S. on suspected drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean islands. Now, the British officials say they're concerned that recent U.S. strikes on small vessels may violate international law. As you may know, many of the islands in the Caribbean are under the banner of British flags. They are British citizens there, and so they keep an eye on what's going on there for their own safety, and now for the safety of maybe the drug guys, believe it or not. They're not quite into putting out the information that would tell the Trump administration what boats and what ports are being used for drugs, because the reports have the pause being more about a month ago. Basically, they've been holding back for quite some time and covering some tip-offs that could have been used to target other boats at sea. Now, since early September, the U.S. has carried out a series of lethal strikes on fast boats near Venezuela and in the Eastern Pacific as well. They've killed dozens of people. They said they've kept plenty of drugs out of our nation, and Washington frames this as a narco-terrorism. And the conflict is now armed conflict with armed combatants, although that's not quite how that works either. Critics are calling the killings extrajudicial. They say, they should be stopping boats. They should be pulling them over. They should have pictures of drugs on the boats when they blow them up, afterwards. But operations are expanding through October and even now, drawing much scrutiny across our country and people watching these things. Not that we're looking for drugs to come into our country, but you can't just start dropping bombs on people just because they're in the speedboats. Now, the move is having some strain on some channels between the U.S. and the U.K. with the security relationship right now, even as the broader Five Eyes ties cannot go through what's going on. Colombia is even ordering its own suspension of intel sharing with the U.S. over the same operation, even though Colombia is not a big fan of Venezuela either. They just are kind of worried about just the legality of just dropping bombs on boats in the Caribbean and now Pacific Ocean. British lawyers are warning that UK could face liability if data-enabled strikes are deemed unlawful. That means if the UK gives the US some data that they use to blow up a boat and it's an issue, they could have legal standing by being accomplices, and they don't want that. The concern over in London centers on whether peacetime human rights laws and maritime law, not the wartime rules, apply, because no one's declared war on anybody other than the sort of in-your-head war that Donald Trump has put in on narcotics. And these are sea killings that essentially are akin to just pirates on the Caribbean just slashing at each other, except we're using drones and Hellfire missiles. Both governments say they remain close partners, but this freeze in this particular area could slow some joint interdictions on drug things here in this side of the world, and maybe some other things going forward. Formal legal guidance from London will tell them how to manage stuff, and public U.S. legal rationale may help on this end with us, them, and Caribbean partners forming a deal basically following Colombia's lead. Now that Colombia and Caribbean partners are a little leery of this as well, we, the U.S., may need to actually frame these things in ways that the words mean something. Pausing intel does do a bit of damage for all of us, and not allowing the sharing intel and sharing of information to make sure that everybody can get information on what's going on for the details of the dangers, especially in the drug trade. But it's also, as UK is saying, they don't want to be responsible for when Trump fires the button on the wrong guy and they prove that they're not quite doing the right things. You may or may not be a fan of Donald Trump, and you may or may not think what he's doing are great things. And so your mileage may vary on what side you want to fall onto that sword there. In the meantime, we do know that extradition issues are going on. Things are happening. Things are going through. There's just less communication in the drug realm in the Caribbean because of the lack of accountability and maybe lack of legality of what's going on by the U.S. in the drug world in the Caribbean.